Okay, so my name is Viktorija, and today I will be speaking about multi-layer testing that we have in Vinted. I will cover some big picture approaches that we have and what I do personally in my team. So a little bit about me. I have around 10 years of experience in testing, both in small startups, in big corporations, working manually, automating security performance testing. And I've been working in Vinted for over a year now, and it's been amazing, and I'll tell you all about it. I love it here. And I enjoy breaking things as I am a QA engineer, but I love building things more, so creating nice and usable things. And my agenda for today is the Vinted's approach to testing, what we have, how are we doing it, what kind of testing types we have, the specialized domain testing that I specifically do in payments, and how we ensure continuous improvement. Okay, so let's start with Vinted's approach to testing. As you probably all know, it's important to set the testing environment. So our testing environment, I used to work in a functional team where testers and developers were in separate teams. We would get releases presented to us, and that led to some issues or challenges like communication gaps, limited understanding of components, since you're working separately from the developers. Dependency delays when you have multiple deployments presented to you, which is more important. All of them are important, obviously. And then you get prioritization and bottlenecks. And eventually, in my previous position and in Vinted here, we're working in cross-functional teams where we have experts from different backgrounds working together. And so those teams consist of different varieties of engineers and experts. It can have product manager, back-end engineers, front-end. Not necessarily. Sometimes we have analytics engineers, sometimes we don't, but we usually have a QA engineer. And the benefits of this cross-functional approach is the deep project knowledge that we can get working with developers, with product managers and engineering managers. We get the consistency of specialization. We know what areas we're working on, and we can decide how we work. We get to define our work process between the team. We have common goals, so we're working on the same features together. We're solving the issues. The communication is easy and direct. We know each other. We get to do team buildings together, and we get to build that team maturity, trust, and psychological safety, which I will mention about a bit later on. So how we actually work. So this is the software development lifecycle. Probably some variation of it you already use. And a problem with this approach is sometimes the development is taking too long, or the deadline cannot be pushed, so the testing is usually the thing that gets cut. Well, there's just not enough time. The features took longer. We really need this feature, so just get it over with, right? What we aim to do is, and what we have been doing for some time now, is layering the software testing lifecycle on top of the development lifecycle, which is starting at the beginning and finishing after everything is done. And not only QA is involved in this process, so requirement analysis, many of these things you've already heard before in these previous talks that we had. So test planning, planning the frameworks that you will be using, challenging the scope, challenging the architecture, the approach, the design, designing the tests, designing the environment setup that you will be using, executing the test, and then monitoring and making test improvements. Obviously, it doesn't always happen like that. So we still have some legacy test automation frameworks. There's legacy teams, legacy features, approaches get outdated all the time. And sometimes it can cause this situation where obviously developers give it to you, say, test this, please. And immediately the app doesn't even open. Right, so there's a tension between the QA and the developers. What are they testing? Why are they looking at this thing instead of what I actually changed? Or from QA side, did they even open the app? Did they even check if their feature works? So we're trying to solve this with the new strategy that we have, and we'll have in the panel discussion later today Sharunas who implemented or planned the strategy of shifting leftwards. And the strategy consists, but doesn't end with these few points, is utilizing the testing before the development starts, so planning ahead, raising the questions, reducing the lead time by providing quick feedback before also the development starts, during the development, enabling the developers test their changes themselves by different approaches, and decreasing the amount of people involved in the release of changes. So there wouldn't be a situation where we would be like, hold on, 5 teams are testing, don't release anything. Yeah, so ideally, from this situation, we want everyone to be involved in the QA process, and this is slowly happening, and it has been happening in a few teams already, raising the right questions. What users will be using? What's the point of this feature? What kind of test tools are we going to use? What kind of test approaches? And so on. So everyone is involved in quality, not only test automation engineers or quality assurance engineers. And part of this shifting left strategy also includes more of a technical side, is merging the tests with application code repositories, transitioning from black box to gray or white box testing, and reducing end-to-end tests in favor of integration tests, or maybe contract testing, component testing, you name it. Just splitting the tests into smaller and starting earlier. Now, to move from the environment and moving forward to what kind of testing types we're using, I listed some of them. Probably we have more, but I specifically didn't want to make this a pyramid, because I think that every team decides how many of which tests they want to have themselves, what makes sense for them, what kind of features they're trying to deliver. So we have unit testing, integration tests, API tests, UI tests that support 3 different platforms. We have a dedicated security team in Vinted that helps with security testing. We're doing performance tests. We're doing A/B testing, which I will want to talk about in a second. And we do monitoring, because I believe that monitoring is one of the most important steps to ensure that everything is actually working. Now, some teams, there's a running joke that some teams are lucky enough that their test environment is not the same as their production environment. So I want to talk a bit more about the production testing and how we do it in Vinted. So this is about A/B testing. And I was actually asked to give a few examples, so we'll see how that goes. So for those who don't know, A/B testing is you raise a hypothesis. For example, you think that the blue button will get more clicks than the red button. You define the test plan. You deploy the changes. So A group of users see the blue button, and B group sees the red button. You run the test. You see which button gets more clicks, and then you run with the best option. So we're doing a lot of different kinds of A/B testing. A lot of it is done by data science. A lot of it is done by developers themselves. So but the benefits of that are that we get to do the data-driven decision-making. So also mentioned a lot today in previous talks, data. We get to see what kind of clicks we have, what drives our users to click where. We get to improve our user experience and retain the customer satisfaction. For example, we even had a support ticket that during one of the A/B tests, a person said, hey, my friend is seeing this new feature where I can catalog, and I'm not seeing it. Why am I not seeing it? And it was actually an A/B test. So we actually get direct reports on our A/B tests, even from the customers. We get to understand our audience. We can test out ideas, approaches, or features and minimize the risks. For example, if we want to test maybe a more risky change or a new payment method, we deploy the change to a smaller user group, check if everything is working as expected, and then release to the rest of the user base. I keep switching, sorry. My hand is tired. Okay, let's continue. And I would like to share 2 examples of A/B testing that are, for me personally, most magical, I guess, or just interesting overall. So we had tap to a translate button in our app. And this button used to be shown for all users, not even necessarily if the buyer and seller have different languages. So if you have even the same language, you can still see this button. So it was seen by buyer and the seller. If we disable this button, so the hypothesis is, can we minimize the translation cost? Technically, this button shouldn't be used. Everyone is seeing the same language, right? And it appears that with A/B testing, we were able to figure out that the costs of clicks decreased by 10% because people weren't accidentally clicking that button anymore. So we were able to save by 10% reduction, 200,000 euros a year, because that button just wasn't visible and people weren't just accidentally clicking that button and generating Google API traffic for us. Another example is regarding the font change. So we had Mason new font as official Vinted font for a few years. That's what was right at the time for us. My fonts had acquired Mason new, and keeping that font would have cost 200,000 a year, same figure for some reason. So additionally, we were expanding into markets where Mason new wouldn't be able to be applied. So Cyrillic and Greek alphabets were not supported by Mason new. So we had to find an alternative. So we chose Inter, which excels in usability, accessibility, scalability, and is free. So we chose Inter, and this is just a change. This is not necessarily something that is experiment-based. We were just changing a font. We were hoping that it wouldn't affect anyone negatively. And after the first A/B test of checking if nothing is breaking down or not working as expected, the data scientists couldn't believe the results and ran the test again. And it appeared that the new font started converting users to active buyers by 0.2 or 2.5% in both experiments. So somehow a change in font started engaging users more. And what I want just to illustrate with this is just test everything. Test, track, and experiment everything. Getting inspired, be passionate about testing. There is no failed experiment. You may not learn something, but you can try something new and see what happens. Let's move on to the specialized domain testing, which is where I am in. I'm testing payments. I joined payments when I joined Vinted, and my job was to create a test automation strategy for payments domain. And payments are responsible of payment processing, wallet solution, payouts, and know your customer feature, which eventually protects our customers from fraud. My job is to ensure the reliability, functionality, and performance of wallet solution. So I have to come up with a strategy that fulfills this purpose. And in backend, so payments is backend based. There's basically no front end. And these are the testing types that we are using. So we still do some manual testing, We're doing performance testing, including load and stress testing. We're doing security testing. As I mentioned, we have an in-house Vinted security team that helps with security testing. We're doing integration testing, API testing, and we're doing unit tests. So I would consider us already a shift-left team, kind of, or already left, where we already review team goals and strategy together as a team. We review the workflow diagrams and architecture, and we can already foresee what kind of test types we will have to use, or frameworks that we'll need to build. We outline and implement the strategy, and we do maintenance and improvements. So how I like to plan my work, for example, if we have 2 services that are about to be started development, during the discovery phase, I tend to plan building frameworks, reading documentation, challenging the discovery results, maybe some ad hoc tasks, and then during the delivery phase, doing the tests, writing the tests, executing those tests, and then later on, during the downtime of discovery, again, new features, new tests, new improvements, new questions, and so on. Now, let's see the actual test layers. I guess let's dig deeper on what we actually have. So we have Vinted Marketplace, which is the user-facing side. We have payment service that I am currently working in payments domain. And we have a few different integrations. I just listed a few payment service providers that we have. There's a lot more around it. Just for simplicity, I drew 3. So yes, other domains, payment domain, third-party integrations. So in payment service, we have unit tests and we have API tests. And those API tests are in the same repository as the source code. We're using the same language, so we're literally speaking the same language as our developers are speaking, and they can review our code, they can suggest improvements, optimization, they review our pull requests. We're using Jenkins CI/CD because that's what the source code is using. So we are in that same pipeline as the service. For tests, we spin up a local environment, so we spin up a service, database, Kafka, or whatever we need, and we mock responses using Mountbank. So it looks somewhat like this, a local service for payments, API tests, and all responses and notifications are mocked. So we are in controlled environment. We are only testing that specific service, and nothing else, and everything else is mocked. Now we're also building a new solution with the microservice-based architecture that will be reachable via API gateway. So the same payment service will be using API gateway, and then multiple microservices are working behind it. So we needed tests for that. So we have exposed API tests for API gateway and internal API tests for those microservices that are not able to be reached via API gateway and are only internally available. So for these specific tests, I call them API integration tests. We have one repository for multiple microservices. We're still using the same language as the microservices. We're using GitHub CI/CD because that's what the architecture is using. And we use Sandbox to verify the integration between services. We also wanted to see if our new solution is working well, so we added another layer of load and stress testing for both exposed and internal API tests. There are a few tools that I considered. Some of them I worked with before, some of them I didn't. And we decided to choose K6 because it was easier to implement with AWS solution and Grafana to see how it actually works in real time. Also, it gives a lot of different metrics, so it's very, very, very useful. I would recommend this tool. I think someone mentioned it already as well. So just to illustrate how it worked, when I first started testing, this is just an example of a get endpoint. One of the get endpoints to see when it breaks. It would break pretty fast. So the gray line is the concurrent users, user count. The blue line is how long it takes to service the API request. So you can see at the same time as the red line starts, the request duration increases, and request per second starts to be very inconsistent. So we noticed this problem. I presented with the data that we gained from these tests. We fixed it, and we decided that this breakpoint is what works for us. We know how many requests we need to service, and how many requests we will be receiving, because we already have a working service and we know what loads we need to cater. So this is the test, the same test after the fix. Just a disclaimer, I guess later on. So this helped identify and improve the bottlenecks of the services, specifically when you're working with microservice-based infrastructure, very beneficial. We also identified lack of metrics visibility, because something was breaking. We weren't sure where it was breaking. We didn't have the metrics implemented, so we spotted those issues. We gathered information at what point we will need to scale, and later, running the tests again, we could see where the performance was degrading or whether it was degrading. And just a disclaimer, yeah, AWS bill can be increased really quickly if you're not careful with these tests. So you have to know what you want to test exactly, and not just DDoS your own services. Be mindful with those tests. Now, yeah, we have continuous integration and continuous delivery, which means that the development is very rapid. We are deploying multiple times a day. Well, multiple teams are pushing changes multiple times a day, and it's a pure CI/CD approach. And it requires tests to be as agile and as versatile as possible, and we cannot have flaky tests in our test suites. So at some point, you need to ask yourself whether these tests are worth having, or are they causing just more problems in the long run? Why do you have to babysit those tests, right? If you can't trust the test, is it really helping you? To continue, I would like to talk about continuous improvement and feedback culture in Vinted, which is, I think, a very important part when you're working as a QA, since you're literally a bearer of bad news. And yeah, the environment is very important, and the culture is very important for us. We have our expectations always set. We know what we need to do. Our values are always reinforced and aligned, and we have high psychological safety in teams. I wanted to share this book. I was afraid that someone will share this book because a lot of people were sharing books. So in this book specifically, there was a hypothesis raised that more experienced teams or teams with people who had more experience, have worked longer together, were making less mistakes than the teams that were fresh, maybe not as experienced. They would make more mistakes, right? So after they ran this test, it turned out that more experienced teams were reporting more issues, and that was because they had high psychological safety in those teams. No issues were swept under the rug. They were able to communicate anything that would happen, like if anyone made a mistake, or if anyone saw that situation was inappropriate, the context was not fair or something like that, they were able to report it. So psychological safety means you have a right attitude to risk and failure. You can tolerate some sort of failure and you will not be punished for that. You can accept that failure will happen. You're willing to help each other, so you're working together, not against each other. We're working with developers and not against developers. You can have open conversations about difficult topics. You can raise concerns if there's an issue, whether it's in the process, it's in the software, or in the environment. And you can be yourself. So inclusivity and diversity. So benefits of that, we get to have honest and direct communication when delivering issues and suggestions. We have the ability to share constructive feedback, giving context, giving any details that would help the person receiving the feedback. And you have the ability to receive the feedback and improve. Take it without being defensive, take it without over-explaining yourself. And that's how we improve, and we have that psychological safety in our teams. So this was way faster than I thought it would be. To conclude, there are many different ways to test. You just need to find what works for you, learn, and empower each other to test. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Viktorija. Very interesting presentation, and as always, there is a lot of questions. Thank you all. Lina already made fun of my facial expressions when I'm reading those questions and trying to make use of it. So let's start. I believe it's straightforward. Regarding A/B testing, is 0.5% change significant enough to make a decision based on it? So probably referring to that conversion rate.
So the context there is that we weren't expecting to have any improvement at all. We were testing if the new font actually makes a negative impact. So 0.2% to 0.5% is actually a lot for us. Given our user base and the size of it, it is a lot of users, and we cannot say that this doesn't mean anything. It still means a lot when we have more activity, more people searching, more people turning to active buyers. So yeah.
So can we say that even though the difference is like 0.5%, but in comparison it is like double the change? Like it is grow like 2 times because it was like
not 0. Yeah, it wasn't expected to be at anything, and it was 0.5%. And yeah, the data science team couldn't believe it. So that's why they ran the test again to see why are we having more users. Maybe there's a coincidence. Maybe released something else that started turning users to active buyers. There was nothing. It was actually the font that started changing how people behave.
Probably that's a topic for another talk. I'm really happy you covered a lot of cultural things and psychological safety. So how is psychological safety measured at Vinted?
So we actually get surveys. I know you probably all have, especially if you work in corporate, you get surveys every 2 weeks or something like that to see how you feel in the team, how you feel in the organization. And I used to work in Oracle where we would also fill out these forms from time to time. You fill it out and you forget about it. And when I joined Vinted, I actually was filling out this form where I just jotted down a comment about something that could be improved maybe. And the same day I get an email, your comment is acknowledged, this person commented back. So people are actually checking those comments here in Vinted, so we can measure that by giving the feedback in the anonymous forms.
It's good to hear. Who updates tests if there's major change? the developer who made the change or the QA? Are changes in source code accompanied by test updates by the devs?
Usually, unit tests, yes. End-to-end tests or API tests are updated by automation team. We have our ownership areas. So if it falls into your specific ownership area, you usually take a look at that. Or, if anyone's available.
All right. Next one, probably question of this conference. How do you measure test coverage?
As I mentioned, we're a backend team. So we have, I usually try to measure it by creating a test plan. So for example, I want to cover these endpoints by these test cases. So if I do that, then it's 100% coverage, probably what you want it to cover, right? Because you can never cover everything. You can never have 100% of automated coverage, but you decide what you want to cover, what you want to automate, and then you work towards it.
Do you test how microservices work together?
Yes.
Yes, my feeling is as well that that was already covered during the presentation. So good, double checking. Does a QA cover all types of testing? Is there a dedicated tester for security?
So for security, yes, we have a dedicated testing team in Vinted that is covering security tests. But since I had worked in a security company before, I usually like to add some additional layer in API testing that checks SQL injections, any scripts to see if anything breaks, and that usually helps us get a faster feedback than a security team would, because they usually do a report. And with API tests, since we run them every day, we can see, for example, this request is not being blocked by our web application firewall, so something must be wrong, or something must be changed in our security. So I like to add that to API testing as well.
The next one, regarding tool selection, how do you decide what automation framework to use? For example, for mobile automation tests. So how the decision is made?
I don't work with mobile. I usually tend to shake off any UI testing or automated testing that is for mobile or UI. We do use Kotlin. I think that's about to change with the shift left strategy. For backend, when I was selecting a tool for performance tests, and now I'm currently selecting a tool for chaos testing, I usually consult with the team itself. I do the research, what kind of features the tool provides, and then we can make an informed decision what works with our architecture, what is the features that we want to test, or what kind of scenarios we want to test, specifically with chaos testing. So it depends on what our goal is. So we decide together. I just do the work, the documentation, and the research.
All right, and for the completion, I would say there are two questions that are on a similar topic, I would say, monitoring and A/B testing. So can you expand a little bit about the tooling for monitoring and A/B testing that you're having?
So for A/B testing, we have our internal tooling that allows us to select what kind of percentage of users will see which version of the feature or which version of the app. And for, what was the other one? Monitoring. We're using different kinds of metrics. Usually data scientists create those metrics that we have a base of metrics that are the most important ones. We have another layer of additional for experimentation, so that when we do an A/B test, we can actually measure the impact and see if it brings any successful results or where we're not able to learn anything from them. or maybe those metrics don't change. So we have a lot of different layers of metrics as well. Every domain has, for example, payments have their own metrics too, because it's a different service. Yeah, a lot of different metrics.
Thank you for taking us to this tour into Vinted testing. I believe it was very insightful and useful. Thank you.